Good evening, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. I hope it's been a good day for all of you. I'm Arjuna Manamperi, the co-host for the today's webinar organized by Organization of Professional Associations and Institution of Engineers jointly. OPA is organizing this through the National Issues Committee and the Career Development and Skills Development Committee, whose chairman will be very soon will appear for a short introduction to the moderator. Without taking any further ado, this particular topic, which is the radically changing nature of myth, reality, or just hype, is somewhat seems to be in this day and age when the whole world is doing firefighting, whether this is an important topic. It's like asking the question, when the ship is burning in the mid-sea, we have to douse the fire, no question about that. However, the ship has to sail to a destination. So we have to think about what's in store for us as Sri Lankan professionals, our careers, our opportunities in 5 to 10 years from now. I don't think we talk about these matters more often than we should be. So therefore, this topic is very appropriate in terms of a strategic positioning for the country. I'm glad that the Institution of Engineers have joined with us as a professional organization, OPA, of which I'm the Vice President of OPA, one of the Vice Presidents, and the National Issues Committee Chairman. I welcome you all. I'm also a member of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, Fellow of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, and is current President-elect. I'm happy to have a joint partnership with the Institution of Engineers. Without any further ado, I would like to introduce our President of the OPA, engineer. He's also an engineer by profession and career-wise, Engineer Shantha Disenrat. President, over to you for a small introduction to the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Engineer Arjuna. Professor Sanjay Senadira, Engineer Dr. Dulaney Kotova, Engineer Arjuna, and Engineer Ravi, the moderators, and our past presidents, ESCO and forum members, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. It gives me immense pleasure to participate in this very important webinar organized by the OPA National Issues Committee, jointly with the Career Guidance and Skills Development Committee, and also with the IESL, Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka. Both these standing committees, NIC and the Career Guidance and Skill Development Committees, are very active standing committees that have a record of organizing many programs useful to the youth and upcoming entrepreneurs in this country. So on behalf of the OPA, as the President of the OPA, I very warmly welcome Professor Sanjay Senadira, our main speaker today, Engineer Dr. Dulaney Kotova, the moderator, and our own Vice Presidents, Engineer Arjuna Manamperi and Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe, and all of you ladies and gentlemen. I hope you will find this webinar extremely useful in the context of understanding the changing nature of work in the industries, etc., which will be an eye opener to all of us. Thank you. Over to Engineer Arjun.
Thank you, Mr. President, for that brief but meaningful introduction. Now I have the great honor of introducing my fellow engineer, my friend and colleague of OP as well as in ISL, Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe. Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe is the chairman of the Career Skills and Guidance Committee of the OPA, which is a very active, very vibrant, very participative committee, of which I am a committee member as well. So we jointly decided to do this together. Ravi is also a member of the corporate member chart, that's the Chartered Engineer of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka. Ravi, over to you to introduce our moderator and the day's proceedings.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, our President, Engineer Shantha Senrat, and Dr. Dulaney Mudun Kotova, as well as the speaker of Professor Sanjay Senadira. Okay, before I give some start introduction moderator, so I will give some brief introduction about the Career Guidance Development Committee in the OPA. So we are doing many guidance and skill development in the country, especially for the professionals. I think this topic is really valid for our people, our students, and our professionals. So radically changing nature of work, myth, reality, or just hype. So I think right now, in the new normal situations, in the current pandemic situations, this topic really valid in my sense. Okay, coming back to the moderator introduction, she is an engineer by profession, Dr. Dulaney Mudun Kotova. She is a head of Department of Interdisciplinary Studies and senior lecturer in Mechanical Engineering, Faculty of Engineering, University of Sejavadanapura. She is a chartered engineer who has graduated from University of Moratuwa, and she has earned her master's and PhD from University of Tokyo. I think Dr. you can conduct rest of the session with our professor. Over to you, Arjuna.
Thank you, Ravi, taking the call from in today. Since Dr. Dulaney, we have time. We have done it on time. We have 5 minutes ahead of time. So therefore, I will, before you take over the podium and start moderating the session, Dr. Dulaney, let me tell you the audience who is gathered here. They are just gathering because at 6 o'clock most of the people will come. Today's session will be a 45-minute, maximum 45-minute presentation by Professor Senadira. And then after that, a Q&A session moderated by Dr. Dulaney for the whole audience. She will tell how it's been done. And then, of course, our chairman of the Career Skills Development and Career Guidance Committee of OPA will also have some questions to be asked from the presenter, very pertinent questions. With that, this session will be recorded. As a result of that, we will edit the recordings and will be presenting it through the ISL website as well as the OPE website, as we normally do. I hope this session will be very useful to the not only for the youth, but even for career professionals who are in the latter part of our careers, who will have to think about in their remaining years what kind of challenges they will face. Because the changes that are happening in the world around the world has actually eliminated some jobs and created new jobs. And when we think that it may not happen to us, maybe it will happen before we know it. So look forward to a very fruitful session, Dr. Dulaney. I will hand over the day's proceedings to you, and at the end of the Q&A session, you will take over the podium and will hand it over to OPA General Secretary, Ms. Ruchira Gunasekara, Madam Ruchira Gunasekara. With that introduction, Dr. Dulaney, over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Engineer Arjuna, for initiating this discussion and also for arranging for actually informing us about Professor Sanjay Senadira. And as mentioned by all the previous speakers, I think this is a very timely topic that we are addressing this evening. So since our viewer base is still gathering, so I would wait a little bit until I introduce the speaker, because I think most of the participants will be joining the meeting around 6 p.m. But in the meantime, I think we also published a preview of this talk, and we had very good response from many engineers as well as students about the importance of this topic. So, I think during today's session, we'll be covering different areas, and Professor Sanjay will be talking about the changing nature of work, as well as what kind of possible changes we will have to expect in different industries, and also what kind of challenges that will be imposed on the professionals in general in this kind of changing environment. And also, it's very important as professionals for us to be prepared to succeed in future work environment. So I think as a person who's currently located in the US, I think he might have a really good idea of what kind of future we are to expect in the coming decade. So so since we are almost at the time, I would actually like to introduce the distinguished speaker for this evening. Thank you, sir, for gracefully accepting our invitation to deliver this talk today. And Professor Sanjay Senadira obtained his bachelor's degree with honors in civil engineering from the University of Peradeniya, and joined the State Engineering Corporation of Sri Lanka. He obtained his professional license from both Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka and the Institution of Civil Engineers London. He later moved to the United States and completed his doctoral degree in civil engineering, specializing in transportation, infrastructure, and materials engineering at Texas A&M University in College Station. Professor Senadira has been serving Texas Tech University for the past 27 years. While maintaining a very active career in teaching and research, he was also engaged with the industry developments and research needs. His current research interests are in novel material systems, sustainable development, and future trends in engineering education. He is the director of the Center of Multidisciplinary Research in Transportation and serves as an associate professor and associate chair for research in civil engineering at Texas Tech. And today he will be speaking about the radically changing nature of work. Is it a myth, reality, or just hype? So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Professor Sanjay Senadira to deliver this talk, which we are organizing from from the Organization of Professional Association of Sri Lanka, together with the Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka. Professor Sanjay Senadira, I would like to welcome you to take over the meeting.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kotova. Can you hear me okay? Just want to make
Yes,
sure that
we can hear you very clearly.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much, and thanks to you for actually coordinating this presentation. And first of all, I would like to thank the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, of which I'm a proud member. I've continued to be since the mid-80s when I first became a member, and also to the OPA, the Organization of Professional Associations in Sri Lanka. That is such a vital organization that we that serves the country, and I think the members of the OPA who are present today, I want to thank you all, along with the members of the Institution of Engineers Sri Lanka, for being here, for your interest in this very important topic, and also for being kind of proactive just by being here in this in understanding the future of work. That's often it's a phrase that's often used in the human resource sectors these days. Okay, and a special thanks to, of course, my good friend engineer Arjuna Manamperi, president-elect of IESL, for number one, his friendship, and he's somebody who has actually continued to engage with me in terms of what's happening in Sri Lanka, encouraging me to participate in activities related to IESL and other educational activities in Sri Lanka. So with that, let me move to my presentation. I'm going to share my screen. Dr. Kotova, if you can indicate if you can see
I think you can share it. Can you please try again?
the screen. Okay, all right. Thank you very much. And thanks to you for coordinating this presentation. And first of all, I would like to thank you all.
So I think you can share it. Can you please try again?
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have not done that yet. Yeah, just a second. Can you see my slide now?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, so let me put it on the
Present.
presentation mode. Okay, it should now be
Yes, now we can clearly see the
on
presentation.
slide mode. Yeah, okay. So radically changing nature of work, myth, reality, or just hype. Okay, because oftentimes when we hear about some topic like this, we have to uh, think of these things in a balanced way, because there is initially, in these kind of new things that we talk about, there's often a lot of hype, that's basically used for promotional activities. So I just want to start with that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to make my presentation here in a kind of a more to promote the dialogue, perhaps later on, if we have the time to discuss some of these things. And it's my understanding that there will be some time. So, is the changing nature of work a myth, reality, or just hype? So, try to answer that try to address that issue, and by taking in four more focused questions, right? So, will the professional work landscape over the next couple of decades will be radically different? What possible changes can we expect, and what are the challenges we will actually face as a result of that, and what can we do about it, right? And because that's one of the things that if in fact it is the truth, that it is a reality, that we need to know what we can do, or is there anything we can do, and if so, what can we do? So let me start this presentation by just telling you a little bit more about myself. Now, Dr. Mudun Kotova introduced me and gave some of this to my own experiences over the last, I would say, 40 years plus. I graduated from the University of Peradeniya in 1981. So it's going to be 40 years since I graduated in September of this year. And so let's start. I started my education at the Indrajyoti Vidyalaya in Battaramulla up to grade 4, at which time I joined Nalanda College, Colombo, and then I proceeded to University of Peradeniya, where I graduated in civil engineering from the university in 1981. Now, I did work in Sri Lanka for a 6-year period, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that soon in the next slide. And then I pursued for my graduate studies at Texas A&M University in College Station, one of the largest, actually the largest university in the state of Texas here, and also one of the leading universities, particularly in the area of transportation engineering, where I actually specialized in. And then once I graduated and got my PhD, I moved to Texas Tech University, first as a postdoctoral researcher, and then ended up joining the faculty here at Texas Tech, where I am now. I have been for the last 27 years. And so as for my professional experience, professional practice, I joined State Engineering Corporation of Sri Lanka as, I guess, about a month after I graduated from Peradeniya. And I had a great opportunity there because I was able to get a variety of different experiences, both in construction, doing buildings and roads. One of the first projects that I was assigned to is the massive Maligawat development project. I was part of the Secretariat building that was being constructed there, that project. And I also had the opportunity to work in the Birgam IPZ road project for SEC as well. And I got the opportunity to actually do my design experience at the design office of SEC. And the building I designed is the Petroleum Corporation headquarters building, which, by the way, was never built. And I believe the Hyatt Tower is now in that same location. And after I finished 4 years, I joined SEC Precast Yard as a works manager, where I was when I kind of decided to do a little bit of a change in career, so to speak, because this was the time when computers were the big thing, and computers were just coming in. I mean, it's true that there was one of the two computers at the time when I was in Peradeniya was in our faculty, and this was like a punch card system for data entry and so on. But nevertheless, we had one. The other one was actually at State Engineering Corporation. So there were two of them in the country. So, and then I joined the DMS, Data Management Systems, and in the software division, and I worked there, and I was particularly engaged in the DFCC software development project that DMS was actually in charge of at the time. And that was partly because I really wanted to be at the forefront of this technological change that was happening. So, and I continue to be interested in this topic, you know, even to this day, you know, it's my motivation to actually also give this talk to you as well, okay? Now, my current affiliation, of course, is Texas Tech University in Lubbock. It is a state university in Texas. And in addition to being an associate professor in the Department of Civil, Environmental, and Construction Engineering, I wear a couple of other hats in the administration. One is as the associate chair for research in my department. And then the other that I have been doing for the last 9 years, that's as director for the Center for Multidisciplinary Research in Transportation. We call it TechMRST, okay? And I've also held a position with the Southern Plains Transportation Center, which is a federally funded, which was a federally funded USDOT University Transportation Center that was actually next, because they fund these things for a limited period of time. So that was from 2013 to 2018. Now, Texas Tech University is located in Lubbock. It's in the northwestern part of Texas. Lubbock is a city of about a little over 300,000 people. So Texas Tech is one of 4 state universities in Texas that have what we call the National University designation, indicating that we do nationally significant education and research work. And it has the highest Carnegie Foundation doctorate granting research institution ranking. And it's the 3rd largest university in Texas with about close to 40,000 students. Now, when I first joined 27 years ago, we were about half of that. So we have had tremendous growth, almost 100% growth in terms of student enrollment from that time. And we have grown even further, even more in terms of the research we do both at the state level as well as the federal level. Now, I need to tell you a little bit about Lubbock here. I've shown you some pictures here, the top one indicating the campus, the main campus where I work. And then Lubbock is an area that has traditionally, it was traditionally known for agriculture, primarily cotton. And a little bit north of us, we have a big, you know, the largest beef cattle industry in the United States. Now, in terms of cotton, it's the largest cotton growing area in the United States and one of the largest, I'm sure, in the world as well. So it has a long tradition of cotton growing, primarily for the fabric, you know, manufacturing industry. Now, the other thing that this area is famous for is energy, primarily, you know, hydrocarbon-based energy, oil. When I first moved in, it was basically about oil. But then since then, we have added a lot of drilling work in the natural gas arena. But more recently, we have developed a very strong footprint on wind energy. In fact, Texas, out of all the 50 states in the United States, in the country, Texas is by far the leading wind energy producing state here, okay? So over the last 27 years that I've been here, we've seen some significant changes in that front, that Texas is a very kind of business friendly state. It's considered to be that way it has been for many, many years, many decades, as a matter of fact. And that is kind of reflected on how entrepreneurs actually flock into the state and also get engaged in the projects that will help the economy to grow, okay? And so the center that I'm leading, I'm directing right now, called TechMRST. MRT stands for Multidisciplinary Research in Transportation. And the word multidisciplinary, the center started in 1997, a few years after I joined the Texas Tech. And Now, we were kind of a little bit at the forefront of this movement at the time, moving from interdisciplinary to multidisciplinary. So we decided that one of the advantages that we have is to take advantage of the size of our university and the type of university that we are, that we can actually fully utilize the multidisciplinary aspect of everything that we do in transportation, not just in engineering, but in other areas as well. So, so this is a center that that actually undertakes work primarily with the state DOT, Texas DOT, and also with the US DOT, and we also have projects that are funded by international agencies as well as private sector. So we have, I've given you a listing of some of the topics. I'm not going to go through each and every one of those. So we are doing some cutting edge work, including intelligent vehicle systems, including data analytics, including traffic safety, novel materials, things like that. So a lot of interesting things are going on in our research program. Now, the Department of Civil Engineering is actually one of the largest, if you think about just civil engineering, the civil, environmental, and construction engineering, one of the largest in the country in terms of the number of students. And we also have 33 tenure track faculty, full-time faculty members. And we are very actively engaged in 3 research centers. Our faculty members, academic staff are engaged in that National Wind Institute, Water Resources Center, and of course, TechMRST, right? So what's causing the changes in the future, or why are we even worried about this particular topic? Now, the thing that I want to mention to you is that, this change of work is primarily driven by technology and our better understanding of the world around us, right? So it is very important for us to think in terms of the history of cognitive evolution in our planet, on our planet. And basically, if you look at it, this is a plot indicating the years. The year 0 means current, and then kind of going back 1 million, 2 million, and so on, so many years, right? So you can see that, and the vertical axis over here is the cranial capacity, basically indicating brain capacity, basically thinking capacity. And you can see that it has had exponential growth. And the knee of the curve indicated by the arrow here indicates, that's really when it's really, it took off. So that was about 2 million years ago. So something really significant happened at that particular time. And if you look at this particular chart, you can see that this is again current, and it's going back to, let's say, 100,000 years, 200,000, and so on, and then 1 million, 2 million, and so on. So you can see that during that 2 million year time frame, that we have, that's about when the stone tools actually came into being. And then about 1 million years ago, there was some development in speech, coherent speech. And about 300,000 to 400,000 years ago, we started kind of significant social interaction. Now, as you know, each of these things are indicative of, intelligence and continuing to move in a positive direction in terms of brain capacity and so on. So these are the starting seedlings, so to speak, in how we continue in our pursuit of what I would call our continued mission, so to speak, the drive towards understanding complexity around us, because it's a very complex world. So the more complex, more understanding of what we have, more understanding that we have of the complexity around us, the more that we do. And in fact, the societies, I would go as far as to say that the societies that have understood complexity in the next frontier, they're the ones who have kind of progressed more and more as we move forward. And it is natural for us because, after all, researchers in the area of human nature, they talk about the fact that our primary purposes are basically to survive and to progress and to grow. Okay, and so this development in intelligence, human intelligence, over not just centuries but hundreds of thousands, if not millions of years here, we have seen that we have progressed towards some very significant technological changes. Now, each curve here indicates a technological cycle. The first one, of course, hydropower, and then we kind of moved into other technologies. But the thing, I don't want to go into much detail here, but one thing I want to emphasize to you here is that you can see that the duration of a particular technology cycle gets shorter and shorter as we go by. And so we are coming to a time here, now we're in 2021, where things are changing a lot faster, right? So change that we are seeing, both in terms of technology and also what's around us, that's not been a new thing. It's always been change, but the change right now is that there has been a very significant acceleration of that change. So that's really what's driving this interest, very strong interest in what would future be like. We've always worried about that, but now we have more and more people working on things, more and more people discussing about this, okay? So what's driving this, these rapid changes? Of course, it is the intelligence, right? Advanced forms of intelligence that's driving these rapid changes. Now, when I think about the advanced forms of intelligence beyond the human intelligence that we all value, that we all have, that we all cherish, that we all use. And so the advanced forms are what we consider to be computer processing power, of course, has increased. I'm going to show you a slide in just a little bit, showing some of the significant features of that. And then the other one is group intelligence. From the time 1 million years ago when we started our human interaction by using speech, forms of communication that way, I think we have been able to share our thoughts and our experiences with other people, and that kind of grows exponentially from that point on. So group intelligence has a very significant role in society today, and that's something that we often neglect sometimes. And we have amassed actually massive amounts of intelligence within our organizations, within the companies that we have. And so on within the community. So that's a very important part of what we do and what makes the world change. And then, of course, we have the often talked about artificial intelligence and machine learning, which has really grown rapidly over the last decade. Artificial intelligence, of course, has been around. That's a concept for many decades, but there has been a shift in focus on how we look at artificial intelligence, and that has really contributed to some very significant changes that we continue to experience, and we will continue to grow in those areas. And part of it is also because of the significant improvement in computing power, because the computing power improvements has allowed us to continue to use the data, collect the data and use that data and develop these very advanced machine learning algorithms that helps us to simulate some of the things that a human brain could do, but maybe do it at a much higher efficiency level for certain things. Of course, we are not at what we refer to as artificial general intelligence yet, but essentially creating a computer that's very much an artificial brain. We're not there yet, even though you can see that these two different trends, you can see these, the knight in a chess set kind of object here. You can see that that's the digital, enhancement, and you can see that the biological brain power over here, and you have the modern day human over here. You can see that we have pretty much caught on in terms of digital computing power, not the intelligence, but computing power. Okay, and so here's another important chart, and this is from 2019, a couple of years ago, and you can see that the green color curves here indicates how much computing power that we actually have. This was the the most powerful supercomputer at the time, so it was able to handle I think 90 billion megaflops of calculations, floating point calculations. And then we have the human brain over here, right? So the human brain is, not too shabby. It has capabilities, but we also know that it has consciousness and that it's able to process these things and and understand reality in different ways each individual can. So the supercomputer that we have, the best supercomputer that we had in 2019 was, could do more than the human brain. But the significant thing that we need to understand is that the human brain would take only 20 watts of energy to do that, whereas this one is spending megawatts in megawatts, right? So we are still far off in terms of efficiency, in terms of energy usage for computing and intelligent activity. At the same time, we are making great inroads in that area, but there are certain things that a supercomputer could do that the human brain cannot, and we have certainly reached that situation. And so all of these changes have driven the world towards a more information driven, particularly the business world has gone more towards the more information driven society. And you can actually credit Bill Gates and Paul Allen, who started Microsoft, and creating this revolution of software driven activity, right? So they are the ones who made software what it is today. In fact, that has a dominant role in economic activity now. So you can see that 1995 to 2020, how things kind of changed. These are the 20 most valuable US companies in those 2 years. And you can see the yellow now concentrated at the top, those are the technology companies, okay? So they have come to dominate the landscape. Now, so if you think about the future of global trends, we have the accelerating rate of change, and that means it is not just changing. It's the computing power is not just accelerating. It's not just changing. It's not just increasing. It's the rate of increase is accelerating. So that has really changed the way we look at things. And in fact, it has created a lot of challenges for us as a society to how to adapt to these changes because it's happening so fast, right? And part of the drive towards artificial intelligence and machine learning and developing those tools is, I think at the crux of at the bottom of that, this drive is really to find tools that will help us manage this accelerating rate of change better, okay? And then, of course, we have machine intelligence. We talk about in the United States, we generally tend to think of it in terms of a convergence, where you have the human brain trying to simulate that, and the computing power, and then, of course, the human being. All these things actually will come into one place. So we will be able to do a lot of things. There will be a lot of artificial intelligence built in at that time. We are not there yet, but if you read what people like Ray Kurzweil, who has been a big proponent of the accelerating rate of change and who has really initiated the conversation on it, he said that we are about maybe 2 decades away from achieving that, what he calls singularity, okay? And we also have people who are looking at things in a more transdisciplinary way, and this would be when you actually think about the human side of things as well, not just about keeping our digital intelligence capabilities keep on increasing, but at the same time think about the human aspect, the uniquely human aspects, and how we can make our lives better by doing these kind of things, not to allow it to deteriorate, okay? And so the changes are, of course, driven by revolutionary transformations in software and hardware, as well as something that we refer to as complex systems. So the systems nature of work is something that has really caught on, and that is kind of the next frontier of our understanding of the complexity around us, right? And so these lead to very uncertain times. In fact, we are in uncertain times. On top of that, we don't now have the pandemic to deal with. But even without that, it has been a very uncertain time because of the rapid change. So during these times of change, of course, it creates a lot of uncertainty, and the people who are prepared, societies that are prepared for that, are the ones who usually flourish. Okay, so there have been a lot of writing, a lot of research, a lot of discussion in these areas, and I have kind of listed here 4 of the books that I have personally read over time. that I think are very notable books. And the Singularity is Near is Ray Kurzweil, the person that I mentioned, his book that started the discussion in 2005. And then I also need to mention about Edward O. Wilson, who's somebody who introduced this idea of what we call sociobiology. And he wrote this book on consilience in 1998, so it's more than 20 years ago, where he actually introduced this idea and said that we are actually in a quest, ever since the Big Bang, happened, that created the universe. We have, the initial dominance was in the area of physics, right? All happened because of the physics. And then we developed the discipline of chemistry, and then biology, behavioral science, basically psychology and neuroscience. And then, of course, we have the social sciences like economics, sociology, anthropology, and so on. Now, so what we are doing right now with all of the brain power that we have, both natural and artificial intelligence, we are actually moving up in this ladder, to create, to understand these and actually introduce scientific thinking in all of these. Now, we have been using scientific methods, but we have not been very good at using mathematics and logical thinking in order to move up the ladder. So we are doing more mathematical work, modeling work in behavioral sciences now. And the next and final frontier is going to be the social sciences that could allow us to model social interactions, processes like even politics and perhaps even religion. Okay. Now, so all these things, the improvements that we made in these areas, particularly in social sciences as a science, has allowed us to tackle, or at least started tackling, these grand challenges. These are the 17 US grand challenges for sustainable development. So we have some big goals here to end hunger and poverty and improve health and so on. I'm not going to go and repeat all of these things, but it is really this this advanced knowledge and using that advanced knowledge and science in the areas of behavioral science and social sciences that has allowed us to even think that we can tackle these problems, and we are more equipped than ever to do that. Okay. And if you look at something like the US National Academy of Engineering, which is of course an engineering body, and there are other professional bodies who actually do this in different ways, whether they are in engineering science or in other behavioral areas. But and you can see that they have a list of grand challenges that are a little bit more focused, advanced personalized learning, which is what we all strive for as societies. It's just that we don't have the resources to do that. But now with the computers, computing capability, the networking capability, we are able to do that. So we have a long list of things over here that highlights, the emerging kind of frontiers in our quest to understand complexity around us, right? Better understand complexity around us. Now, so if you think about, this is a kind of a nice chart that indicates kind of the companies, the corporate side, the companies that actually dominate the world today in terms of global market cap. So each company, the radius of the circle or the diameter indicates how big they are in terms of the market capitalization. And you can see the usual culprits over here. This is kind of the US side. You have China, which has an ever-growing portfolio and group of companies that are going to be more dominant. And we have Japan, South Korea, the Western European countries, and so on. Saudi Arabia, primarily because of the company Saudi Aramco. These are companies that have a lot of influence in economic activity, so this. Part of the reason, of course, is globalization has helped these companies grow into what they are today because of the technologies that they developed. So globalization, of course, is the true definition of globalization, if you think about it at the basic level, is replicating something that was a success in another country and you go and replicate it in another place. So this globalization has been sort of one direction, going in one direction in terms of from the technologically developed world to the less developed, right? And there's no reason for that to be that way, but you have to really develop the capabilities in terms of creative thinking and analytical organization. And one of the countries that is well positioned, even though the economy is not very big, one of the countries that's well positioned to do this now is Israel. Okay, and so if you think about some of the companies that have really made the created radical changes in the way we live, and I have kind of identified them through images over here. I mean, the usual culprits here, and one of the big things that is actually staring at us right now is cryptocurrency and blockchain, and that's one of the things that we talk about a lot. And just for pure speculation, it is an industry now. If you call it an industry that has more than $1 trillion of capitalization, and it's a very powerful lobby, and it is actually created based on a white paper on cryptocurrency that was written by this fictitious figure called Satoshi Nakamoto, and nobody knows who that person is. But that started the discussion in 2009. That's when the white paper was published, and really what the intent of that particular revolution, I would call it a revolution because it has really come into existence and become a very powerful force, is to essentially make transactions that we make, whether it is a financial transaction or some other type of transaction, basically done by individuals. There is no middle people out there, right? So just imagine what kind of revolution that can create, and that's a change. I personally think that that's going to come eventually, but of course, this is now challenging a lot of institutions that we have, so it's going to take some time. Okay. Now, one other thing that I want to highlight here is that the picture in the middle is the Giga Texas factory that's being constructed by Tesla to produce their electric vehicles that also happen to be autonomous with the autonomous capability. I had the privilege of visiting this construction site recently. The factory itself, I think it's about 150 acres, just the factory, the building itself, and so they're investing more than $1 billion in just this one factory, and then several like this around the world. But these investments are actually being made to advance the production manufacturing capabilities that we have around us, and it'll be very interesting to see how these things progress and how it's going to change the shape of our world, for good, or maybe for not so good, at least for some parts of the world. So we have to be very, very mindful. We have to continue to educate ourselves, whether we're in Sri Lanka or United States or any other place, so that we can better understand and adapt to these kind of changes. And one of the things that I'm personally very excited about, I have a picture here of Eric Drexler, who's considered to be the father of what we refer to as nanotechnology. And his book, a more recent book called Radical Abundance, where he's talking about molecular level manufacturing. And we are still in the process of developing machinery for that. Now, when that happens, that's going to be a very revolutionary thing in the area of materials, any kind of material that we deal with, including food. And I'm particularly excited because that happens to also be my research area. So there are some individuals who are often not very much in the news, people like Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey, who's very active in the cryptocurrency area, and Peter Thiel, one of the most respected, thinkers and venture capitalists, who's actually shaking up this technological landscape. I mean, he came into prominence recently, saying that people who are prepared for it, should not go to college and do a startup business, start a business as a startup. And in fact, he has Thiel fellowships that give young people $100,000 to get their startup companies going. So very, very interesting things going on. And these people are investing a lot of time and resources and money to advance technology, advanced knowledge, and so on. Now, one last thing I want to mention in this study is what we call CRISPR, and all of you, I'm sure, have learned about it. Last year's Nobel Prize was won by two ladies, one from US, one from France, jointly, who developed the CRISPR technology to basically cut and replace our genes, that can create a healthier human being. There's a very controversial social aspect behind, following that. So that's something we will continue to hear about. So, okay. Now, there are many, many different areas of rapid technological growth that's happening, and I have a list here. I'm not going to repeat each and every one in the interest of time. So we do have data analytics, AI, and machine learning. We have automation and adaptive manufacturing. I have a very small, video clip at the end that I'm going to show you that I'm going to use as a springboard for the conversation. And we also hear about 5G, what it can do, basically taking your GPS sensitivity from like 1 meter scale to a millimeter scale. So 2 or 3 different orders of magnitude. So the things that it can do to manufacturing and other things. Biotechnology, I just mentioned about CRISPR, then renewable energy, very exciting things happening there. I mentioned about cryptocurrency and blockchain, space technology, space tourism is starting, and then nanotechnology, molecular machinery, and manufacturing. Very, very exciting area as well. There's a lot happening in the research landscape. Okay, so one of the things that I'm personally involved in, and I think a lot of people are now thinking about also, is that how do you educate for the knowledge to skills shift? Because for the longest time, we have essentially our education system has been designed to provide knowledge to people, and now we are talking about skills-based learning, not knowledge-based learning. And of course, we need knowledge, but knowledge is not sufficient in this complex world around us. We need skills, and I will explain to you why we need those skills in a moment. Okay, so changes in economies are directly linked to the rate of change of the technology. So we are moving from knowledge-based to skill-based, economy, and the education, of course, is following that, right? And the best way to prepare for that this kind of rapid change, of course, is to develop skills for self-learning, right? Because my dean here, Dr. Al Sacco, who's a former astronaut, he keeps telling us that the kids that we teach now, they will be tackling things in about 5 years' time, 10 years' time that they never thought existed. So they have to learn things, sort of relearn a lot of things, and then adapt as they go, right? So we have to prepare these kids not in the way that we learn, but in a way that this particular generation and the generations to follow can do it, right? So what is important then is a well-rounded education. Now, this is often something that we neglect. We say, okay, computers is a big thing, so if you want to get a job, learn coding. That's what we say. But that's true. If you want a job, that's one of the things you can do, because that will increase your chance of getting a well-paid job. But at the same time, there's no point in being a coder without knowing what the world is like, what humans are like, what social systems are like. So it's very important for everybody to have that foundational knowledge, and most importantly, knowledge like sciences, and I would put at the very top, mathematical and logical thinking. Those are the things that provide that foundation for us to move forward. Okay, and then in terms of core knowledge, I always highlight in my education talks about Steven Pinker's list of things that a rational person should know, right? So things like history, prehistory, various milestones that we talked about a little bit, human cultural diversity, physical and life sciences, logical and mathematical thinking, arts and humanities, very, very important for a holistic human being to kind of grow, governance and the rule of law, and communication and the human understanding. So he basically emphasized the fact that, educated people should be rational. They should think rationally, and also they should not engage in superstition, rumor, myths, and those kind of things, not to promote those things without having any kind of rational and scientific understanding of it, right? And so getting back to the discussion on skills, so professional competencies for the 21st century, here is a list of things. Adaptability, how well can you adapt to changing situations? Analysis, solution mindset, having a positive mindset. So even if things are changing and you get frustrated, but have a can-do attitude. Now, that's certainly something that's very, very important in this context. And then collaboration. Now, I have highlighted collaboration because that is one of the things that we emphasize on, to develop that group intelligence capability among individuals. How do you function in a kind of a group setting, right? And then communication, digital fluency, empathy. Feeling like, trying to understand what others would feel and how they would operate and so on. And that's a very, very important trait from a humanistic perspective. Then entrepreneurial mindset, very, very important. Self-awareness, knowing who you are, very important. And then social diversity and awareness. So these are some of the things, skills that we actually allow our students in our program to develop as they progress in the curriculum. Okay, it's not just about subject matter. We need to have this, and the companies and organizations that employ them now value these things very, very highly. Okay, so I'm going to take an example from engineering here, and I know that there are professionals from many, many other areas, but engineering as a social endeavor, engineering in a complex world, that is systems world, engineering using data-centric technologies, engineering in a rapid changing landscape, and then educating for innovation. So all of these things, and this would apply to any other discipline as well. So how do you go about doing something, to cultivate those skills that we talk about, what we often refer to as soft skills, right? So if you think about a curriculum like ours, and I'm actually going back to our engineering curriculum here. So we have 4-year curriculum, and we start with year 1, and year 2 are primarily traditionally have been spent on what we call tool skills, learning mathematics, learning science, learning humanities, and learning communication, right? And then we add other things like mechanics and so on, and about resources and measurements and economics and so on. But in year 3 is when we spend more time on engineering principles and problem solving. And then year 4, now we are essentially dedicating that to what we call integration skills. Now, this is what the world is asking for. Provide them with the knowledge, but make sure that they have integration skills, how to put things together, how to work together in groups and teams, right? So things like design, things like systems design, because how to integrate these designs into like a system, dealing with uncertainty, probabilistic aspects, how things can change, sustainability. So we engage the industry more so in this year 4, so that the industries can be a very productive stakeholder. It's something that benefits them as well. And now all of these things start in a big change that we have made here to develop system skills earlier on in the curriculum. We have introduced 3 courses at the first year level. One is computational thinking. Second one is bio-inspired design. That's a course that I teach. And then socio-technical systems. So these are things that introduce them to the idea of design, and then how computational, essentially taking the students away from Excel to more like Python or Java or something like that, okay? Or HTML5, those kind of things. And then let them think in those terms for the rest of the curriculum as they progress. Bio-inspired design the same way, introducing them not only to biology and the world around us about ecosystems, but also allowing them to identify, train themselves to establish these linkages, okay, connections, and that are very important for you to understand in terms of systems. And socio-technical systems is very, very important, because anything we do, no matter whether we are engineer or some other profession, what we do influence society, affects society. And so it's very important for you to understand as you go through this curriculum, what impact it would have, okay? Now, all of this done in the context of a team, not so much a working group as a team. So it's not a hierarchical, team, but it's more about shared responsibility you have. If it's a team of 6, each person is there for a particular purpose, who's an expert in that particular area. So because of that, for you to function in that team effectively, you need to know a little bit about what these other people in the team, your teammates, what is their expertise. And so you need to understand, that's where the holistic, well-rounded education becomes very, very important. It's not just about coding and data. It's more than that, much more than that, so that you're able to function in a team environment much more effectively. The way I look at it, this is the most important skill that one can develop for the future. And so one of the things that the workers who with higher technical, cognitive, emotional, digital and advanced technology related skills are in big demand, no matter where they are from, no matter where in the world that you would actually end up working. So the workplace is very much the market for talented workers, manpower, not manpower, basically human resources, is a global one. And that's some of the larger companies, of course, think in those terms. So when they try to hire talented individuals and they want more of them, they are not just looking at the country where their headquarters is at. They are looking at the world to hire people from no matter where they're from, as long as the talents match the expectations, right? So the human resources management specialists must adapt to these realities. So this is becoming a very, very important discipline here, a profession, because now they are the ones who have to manage this. You know, it's becoming very complex because of the changes that are taking place, the skills that are changing, and then they have to kind of keep up with that. Now this comes from, of course, McKinsey and Company, and some of you may or may not like it, like the companies like that. Because after all, though, they are the ones who are driving the world economy for the most part through visionary directions that they implement. But if you look at this, and this of course is for United States and Western Europe, 14 countries in Western Europe. So they're talking about the future. Accompanying skill shift for technologically advanced societies. So they're talking about more manual kind of activities and then basic cognitive skill activities. Both of those things, the demand for demand for human resources is going to go down 14-15%. And then if you look at some of the other things, the higher cognitive skills, higher abilities of analyzing things in terms of leadership and so on, particularly when it comes to social and emotional aspects. People who want to lead and more importantly, leading changes, the rapidly occurring changes and so on. So those are going to be in very high demand. And then the technological skills, of course, they are going to be in high demand. People who can code and people who can solve complex problems, people who can be creative and innovate. So they have done the studies and actually quantitatively looked at some of these demands here. Okay, now this one I know is a busy study. This is the best actually documentation that's out there if you are interested in looking at different industry sectors. This is a report by once again the World Economic Forum. It is about the future of jobs, and they have looked at these 15 industries, and they are essentially talking about what is the likelihood as a percentage that there will be significant changes, and then expected, basically significant, the likelihood of what I would call reskilling people as the technology changes. You can see that it varies from a low of, I think, low of 10.6 to a high of 20.8 likelihood, right? Very significant changes that are happening in all of these industries between that range. And then the expected redeployment in terms of profession, the success rate, if you try to do that, that changes anywhere from 30.9% in the education sector to 51.1 in the energy, utilities, and technology sector, right? And then the last one is the average skills instability for each and every one of these industry sectors, the 15 sectors, with a low of 36%. The lowest, the instability, highest instability is 55%, and the lowest instability, which is the good thing, is in the agriculture sector and so on. So this is actually, if somebody wants to look at their own industry sector and understand how the World Economic Forum's interpretation of how they are, how the industry and skills change, this is one of the greatest sources that you can go to. And they also have done analysis, specific analysis to about 26 countries from all over the world. Okay, 26 elected countries, and they even identify the professions that are going to be affected the most in a positive way and also in a negative way. So it's a great resource. And of course, in this presentation, I don't have the time to go through each and every one of those, but I think it's very, very important. Okay. Now the organization itself is changing. So when you think about the organization here, we have traditionally had the hierarchical organization. We have a CEO, and then we have middle level management, and then we have the next level of management, next level of activity, and so on. And now we have moved away over the years, over the last few decades. We have moved into systems, we have moved into capability driven organizations. And then the organizations that we have now, because of this very rapid change coming from that's technology driven, we have what we call market oriented ecosystems, where the market is very much, being considered on a daily basis, right? So we have these clusters of teams within an organization, and that's working towards a common goal to grow that organization and to provide better service, come up with better products, and so on. So because of this, the human resource department now has to adapt to that situation, particularly in larger organizations. And you have to have people who actually can cultivate these areas, the culture and change, because change is happening very, very fast. Human capital curators, total rewards, how to reward employees, then strategic position, a person who's thinking about the strategic direction of the organization or the company. Paradox navigator, basically we have to deal with paradoxes from time to time. So how do you deal with that? Credible activist, somebody who takes up a cause and, who has the credibility to promote that and so on. And then competency, these are some of the basic things, of course. And then analytic designer and interpreter, right? And then technology and media, integrator. So all of these are some of the key areas that are often talked about. This is based on work done by Ulrich at the University of Michigan, and so these are very, very important for the organizations in the modern day, and to develop the human resource, not just to recruit people, but also to keep them. And if the world changes, how to retrain them in the terms that they use is what they call reskill or upskill of employees. And so all these things are very important. So the human resource departments have a very, very important role to play in this environment. Even in a country like Sri Lanka, it doesn't have to be a developed country, because you have to prepare in that context. Now this is a video that I want to show you. Please confirm, Dr. Kotova, if you can hear the audio. If you cannot hear the audio once I start, it's just a couple of minutes long.
We cannot hear the audio.
Oh, you cannot? Okay, just
Yes.
a second. Okay. Just give me a
I think probably you might have to stop sharing and share it again with audio. There's a small tick box that you need to click.
Yeah, I'm looking at that here. Are
Now
you
we
able to
can
hear
hear.
that?
Yes. Yeah. Now we can hear.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I picked that particular, video clip. It's a small clip that I show my students as well. Of course, the concept, of course, is it's applicable to any profession, even though this is an engineering example. Now, so what you can see in this particular, excuse me, what you can see in this particular case is that it is a classic example of what technology can do in the current context, right? And so here it's almost like having a crane in a construction site, feeding materials and building this two-story building. I think it's about 2,000 square feet or 640, I think, square meters of area. And so if you look at it carefully, of course, what has really happened is that you are using this one machine. Now it is a much more intelligent, smart crane that actually has a built-in design graphics involved, something like Civil 3D that we use, three-dimensional drawing. And then it has a material feeding system that is also smart, right? So we have replaced all of the workers for smarter equipment, that smarter crane, so to speak, or the material and material feeding system and the construction machine. So instead of building it over like a couple of months, maybe 2-3 months, you build it in maybe a day or two. Okay, so what does it do? Now, this is a classic example of us moving towards a more software-driven, design-driven society, right? So if you are a more creative, organization or individual organization that is aware of what's happening and try to, come up with tools that will allow you to develop these things, you will be able to compete. Now, as a society, you can say, this is going to put so many people out of work, right? Put so many people out of work. And then we don't want to do this kind of thing. There's a significant moral case for that, right? But the thing is, if this one is going to be a fraction of the cost that goes into building this, will you still be able to do that in a realistic, economic environment? I think what's happening all around us is basically the reason that we are moving towards these more efficient, more intelligent systems is partly because of these economic pressures that are put on us, right? Now, as a society, you may be able to resist this and say, we are not going to go in that direction, but for how long, I think is the question, right? So more software driven, less labor. Now, of course, there's a question about what do we do about labor, right? And because after all, the role of a government in a country is about finding meaningful work for people so that they can make a living and make a living and be happy, right? Be healthy and be happy. And so there are some challenges ahead and some decisions to be made. So how do we prepare for that? So the future work is will see a major shift in all professions towards from knowledge-based to skills-based. And some professions actually are more prepared for this kind of shift from knowledge to shift than others. Most professions will see a need to upskill and reskill their employees. Okay. Now, professions should continue to maintain, professions being different professional organizations in particular, should continue to maintain, activities to conduct what we call SWOT analysis, right? Strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats types of analysis for various future, scenarios. And because it's not just about technology that's there today and whether you want to adapt to that, but what if a new technology comes tomorrow or next year and so on. You need to be aware of those kind of things too. So there has to be a continuous engagement in professions about reevaluating the position year after year after year moving forward. So the governments will maintain a consistent strategy and provide support for professionals and citizens to adapt to changing situations. So that's an important role for a government. And I think for a country like Sri Lanka, I think my recommendation or suggestion would be that the government should promote a strong culture of applied and fundamental research in all agencies. And you can easily do that within the current context by putting a very, very small, I mean, I'm talking less than 1% of the budget of any agency and put it towards research. Okay. And so you can stay abreast of these changes. You can develop new technologies and creating that, to developing that creative footprint in the country, the knowledge base in the country that will allow you to move forward to be better prepared for the changing environments that we are going to see. And it's going to get even more intense as we move forward. So agencies should develop system network maps of all activities to develop sound data management plans. So everything is going to be now developed based on data. So part of that applied research component of this research fund could go into developing these maps so that you can understand not only your organization and your agency, but also your stakeholders, the customers that you service. And if it's a government organization, it will be the public that you serve. If it is a private company, it would be your customers and your suppliers and your other stakeholders. So those things are important to create these kind of systems, network systems. This activity. And this applies to not just science and engineering organizations. It applies to any kind of organization, any profession too. And then research funds should be diverted to develop these integrated system to collect, store, analyze, and synthesize data for both short and long range decision making. Okay, and I think that in my mind that would be a reasonable roadmap to accelerate the thinking in this front in a country like Sri Lanka. I know that there are people who are already working on it. Just the fact that we have this discussion today is an indication that people are thinking seriously about this. Okay, I think this is my last slide here. So with that, I thank you again to IESL and OPA and for all of those who attended and listened attentively. And I want to thank Dr. Kotova one more time for facilitating this and moderating this session. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that wonderful talk, which introduced us about the new changes that we can expect in the future, and also some tips on how to survive in such environment. I've been having many questions, so I would like to select a few and ask right away. So the first question I'd like to, and also for the audience, if you would like to directly ask the question from the speaker, you can use the raise hand option, and I will try to accommodate them according to the as much as we can with the time. So has the STEM education been a contributory factor for the technological changes taking place in the USA?
Yes, I would say yes, it has. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah. So I would say yes, it has. But I think it has certainly accelerated it. I mean, they have actually emphasized STEM education because of the fact that the technology was at a point where they needed that acceleration in activities in those areas. I mean, the United States, if you look at the education system we have today, it's a very diverse system, and it is a system that is built to innovate in the way that we educate people. So there are a lot of different ways of looking at education. Yeah, and there's a lot of freedom, particularly at the higher education, post-secondary education agencies. There's a lot of room for innovation and so on, and that's a positive for the country. And but STEM is definitely has definitely contributed to that, particularly in the areas of computer engineering, computer science, data analytics, and so on. Because we've always had here very strong, science education, a really strong liberal education system, because that has really been the bedrock of intellectual activity in this country. And it still is, but there is now a kind of a shift towards the STEM, even in those agencies. And one of my daughters actually studied at a liberal arts uh, okay, that's some disturb. So one of my daughters actually studied at a liberal arts school and basically teaching young people to basically give them teaching them basic holistic skills, but at the same time give them freedom to what education really provides to you, particularly liberal education, is to let you decide, give you the confidence to decide what you want to think about or what you want to study or what you want to be. So that's really been an important part in this process as well. Even though STEM has had a much more short-term impact, I think that liberal education, the foundational education, where humanities and creative arts is a big part of that. That also has contributed a lot to this, not just STEM.
Okay, thank you very much, sir, for answering that question. And the next question that has been asked is, considering all these factors, which novel technology Sri Lanka should focus for development for special economic development? If I may repeat the question again,
Yeah, please. Yes.
considering all factors, which novel technologies Sri Lanka should focus for economic development?
Well, no, that's a very tough question for me to answer. But I think more. I think I would probably. I mean, it's also a question that I don't think I'm qualified to answer because I've been away from the country, even though I know what's going on and so on. I try to stay abreast of what's happening in Sri Lanka and but I think it's for obviously for the country to decide. But I think one thing I would say is that uh, the thing that's needed at the moment is to design the education system that will allow the young people in the country to adapt to this changing environment. I think that's the number one priority, and it's an urgent priority for sure. I mean, we have always had great education tradition. We have good basic education, but as you saw in some of the data that I showed, the basic education, the basic cognitive skills are not enough anymore. So now you have to develop these advanced cognitive skills. So you have to develop these advanced emotional skills. And then, of course, you have to have advanced should mute this gentleman or something like that, or gentleman or lady. So I'm sorry. So I think in terms of technologies, I think you can. In terms of technologies, I think you can look at basically science education, mathematics education, and of course education in education in other areas, but we cannot forget the humanities and the arts, because I think that is a foundational piece that allows people to think innovatively also. Because in fact, if you talk to people now, they talk not just about STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, but they talk about STEAM, right? STEAM means that additional A means arts, right? Arts and humanities, because that is such an important part of developing the creative processes that you need, okay, as an individual. So I would say number one is the education, even though I'm not talking about the technology, but the obvious choices in terms of technology, of course, are learning how to code, understanding computing and data, understand do a very good job of teaching young people statistics and the tools that are available nowadays. The big hot field that we call data analytics, which is basically computing and statistics combined to develop some of the tools. So I think those things are very important in the short run. Yes, but I think we need to also think about how to introduce some of these systems level ideas to young people, and hence the motivation in our engineering school, my own engineering school, to teach things like bio-inspired design that helps people to establish these, understand these connectivities better, so that even when they go into work in some organization, whether it's engineering or science or even in other areas, human resources and so on, or maybe legal profession, medical profession, you have already kind of developed that important skill of making connections. So ultimately it goes to this, what we call the systems thinking, right? So systems science, systems engineering, very important. Okay, and I know that I was not very specific in answering that, but at the top of my list is the education system right there. Okay.
Right. Okay. And also one thing we can see is with machine learning and these new technologies, we are kind of heading towards something like a black box, which cannot, which works perfectly, but still nobody understands what's going on in it. So what are your thoughts on that, Professor?
Now that's a very important question. I think I'm thankful that you asked that question from me now, because this is the decision that a country has to make, right? Now, countries like the United States, countries like China and Japan and many other countries, and Israel is another one, Western Europe, and there are many other countries, of course, that are in this bandwagon here, and they have made a concerted effort to be on the creative side of things, right? Develop creativity. I mean, it's a buzzword that we use all the time. And developing creativity, there is no recipe, simple recipe to develop creativity. It's something you have to cultivate from a very young age, providing confidence to young people, and giving them freedom to think, make mistakes, and learn from those mistakes, and so on. So you have to make a decision, I think, you have to decide how much are we willing to dedicate in terms of resources in a country to cultivate this creative ecosystem, right? Because if you don't do that, number one, somebody else can, you will only be a market for somebody else, right? And the other side of the coin, of course, is that you can be on the operational and maintenance side of things. And when I look at Sri Lanka now, and I see that we are spending a lot of time on and resources in the country towards developing that operational and maintenance side, emphasizing a lot on technology and so on, things like that. But I think it's a mistake not to think about the creative side of it, right? And because otherwise the creative work is going to be done in somewhere else, in a developed world, a technologically developed world, and you will have no chance in competing with that, because they are the ones who have the complex systems, the capabilities, and they will come up with designs and software and so on that that can do a much better job no matter where in the world that you're talking about, and they will develop everything creatively, and the others will be just spending money. And another example of why Sri Lanka is in a kind of a situation with the foreign exchange crisis and so on, because we have not done enough, I think, to develop that creative mindset, the capability to operate as a creative ecosystem that will allow you to export knowledge and expertise. Okay, so that I'm once again I'm thankful that you asked that question, because this is a very, very important part of this equation.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next question is, diversified organizations are developing rapidly, and I'd like to know how this area is being researched.
Uh, Diversified organizations, I'm not exactly sure what the person meant by diversified organizations. Of course, I think if they mean by, let's say, a conglomerate of companies, for example, that's actually dealing with a lot of different things, maybe produce a lot of different products or provide a variety of different services. I think as long as these are complementary, I don't think it's going. I mean, it's going to make the management of that particular company or organization more difficult. But so you need to make sure that you have the tools that are applicable, appropriate, and applicable to that particular environment. But I'm not exactly sure whether I understood the question, at least in terms of what's meant by a diversified organization. Because, I mean, there are diversified organizations, there are organizations that are just catering to a particular sector. Those are easy to manage, but at the same time, that kind of organization also could be at risk in a changing environment, because if something goes wrong in that particular sector, you cannot you will lose it all. You run the risk of losing it all. So if you have a diversified organization, then you can actually survive. But each one, in terms of creativity and adapting to change, each probably sector within that diversified organization has to be tackled, I think, separately. And then you have the additional burden or additional challenge of integrating them together. Okay, I think that's probably where I will have to stop. Maybe that person who asked the question can clarify whether I answered the question or not.
Yes, I think it was asked by Mr. Jagat. Maybe he can confirm if that was what he meant by diversified organization. But until then, let me move on to the next question that is being asked. Why should Sri Lankan professionals be worried about things you mentioned when we are trying to figure out basics in life for decades?
What was the last part of the question? Okay.
Why should Sri Lankan professionals be worried about the things that you mentioned when we are trying to figure out the basics in life for decades? I think maybe.
Okay. I think I understand the question. Thank you for repeating that. Yeah. Um, I think it's the reason is that we live in a globalized society, and Sri Lanka is very much living in a globalized society, right? And I mean, it's one of these things. It's like the old adage in the jungle. You do what you have to do to survive, because you can. I mean, the way I look at it personally, I think it's either you develop capabilities to become a provider of products and services to the world, and Sri Lanka is doing a great job of that in some sectors, a few sectors that I know. Or the other thing is you can become a market, right? So if you become a market, what's going to happen? If you become a market for, let's say, companies from other parts of the world, you're just spending money and that goes somewhere else, right? And that is not really a good way to survive as a country, survive as an economy, survive as a society. You have to develop your own capabilities, and in this technologically driven environment, you need to do that. And then the basic necessities will take care of themselves, because you are now in a much better footing, much better position to have a more diversified economy that will allow you to provide employment, provide the basic necessities to people, whether it's through welfare or through employment. So it puts you in a much greater footing. So it's a balancing act for a country like Sri Lanka. Make tough decisions, of course, and make investments where investments are needed. Investments, of course, are needed in health and education, and of course, providing the basic welfare to people, right? So those things are every country, every government has to provide. And my own mind, those things needs to be provided free of charge. And you have to have income. You have to have income in the country to make sure that you provide those, and then allow the creativity of the people, provide a kind of a platform for the inherent creativity of people to cultivate them, develop them, and then put them to good use. Okay.
Right. Thank you, Professor. And next, I would like to ask Dr. Anatunga, who raised his hand before. So if you're still if you still want to ask that question, Dr. Anatunga, probably you can unmute yourself and ask the question. All right. If not,
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Yeah. No, I wanted to ask several questions, but I got the answers from most of those things from the previous questions. But my concern is mainly, you're mentioning about the STEM and the STEAM. Now, our concentration on STEM, I have a feeling that STEM is highly analytical and rational and so on. So those are the ones that are in great danger with this modern artificial intelligence and, that kind of machine learning and all that. Those subjects are in greater danger than the so-called the cognitive skills, like more conceptual designs. You see, what happened is, even in structural engineering now, the analytical structural designs are getting displaced by the machines, but still the conceptual type of it are still in the domain of the human ability. So what happened is, I'm comparing this engineers and architects. The architects will survive a little longer than the engineers, according to that concept. What do you think of these things?
Well, thank you for that question. That's a very very insightful question there. And I really, let me put it this way. I think the STEM aspects of education, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics on these cognitive skills, the soft skills as we call them sometimes, on top of that, right? Now, the thing is that the automation, just like you accurately pointed out, and I really agree with that observation, that you are going to now need fewer people to do those rigorous analytical work, even though we value that so much as a society that prides itself in core education. And you need a fewer people to do those things, and that's really a direction that we have taken for many years now, and kind of that developing that kind of black box mentality that I think we talked about earlier too. Somebody asked me that question about that, and so I think it's not so much that STEM is not important, because the soft skills have to be. STEM fields are, if you're in the technology arena, STEM fields are, it's a required element, right? But it's not sufficient. That alone is not sufficient. So you build those soft skills on top of that. But the automation certainly will concentrate on the creative activities in the hands of a fewer number of people, and that is for sure. I'm with you there. But there is an opportunity for you to be creative in other areas, so you can create your own niche that may be a very narrower area, but nevertheless you use your creative abilities. Now, the reason that I emphasized on the educational aspect earlier is that that is an essential element of developing the STEM skills, as well as without sacrificing the STEM skills, you also develop the soft skills that allows people to be creative and create their own niche in a certain area. In terms of the architects, and engineers comparison that you make, of course, the architects, when it comes to, creative designs, particularly like buildings and landscapes and so on, the architects, of course, have the dominant position because they are the ones who create the form. But in the architecture arena also, it's a fewer number of people who are engaged in this kind of activity, and that trend is going to continue even in that area. And that's an area also that's undergoing quite a bit of automation. I mean, you need the architects, of course, they provide the creative, visually creative foundation for any kind of design like that. But the support people who are helping the architects, I think, I mean, that's an area that could get affected in a kind of a negative way from an employment standpoint. I hope I answered your question, Dr. Anand.
Yes, I think so. You answered the question. So I'd like to ask one last question, sir. Now we have seen in Sri Lankan universities, usually once the student enter the university, especially I think this is common to almost all the fields. When they are in their certain field, there's very few opportunities for them to change the field in the middle of the way, or to, like if you are, for an example, if you are in an engineering faculty and if you are selected for civil engineering, then maybe in the second year you might think you are no longer interested in civil engineering, but you would like to learn something of electrical or computer engineering or something like that. So how are these kind of rigid structures going to affect the kind of education that you are suggesting for Sri Lanka to adapt?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something that Sri Lanka, I hope that Sri Lanka, in the new, I think, education reforms, I think the government recently announced, at least initiated a conversation on. I think that will certainly put Sri Lanka in a path towards becoming more creative as a society, right? I mean, not that we are not creative, but this will put us in a better situation to compete, right? With the other countries in the global marketplace. Now, but I have always viewed that as a problem for the society in the long run, in the sense that, like, for example, I went into the physical science stream, right? So when I passed my 8th grade at Nalanda College, then I went to the science stream, right? And I took biology in the 9th grade. And then at the end of the 9th grade, I decided whether to go into physical science or biological science. I decided biological science. So I did my 10th grade with physical science, and then 11 and 12 in physical science also, and studying pure mathematics, advanced mathematics, then physics and chemistry. Now, I have not studied any humanities after the 8th grade. Okay, none whatsoever, right? And that is a problem for us. It has not been a problem for us in the older way of doing things, but now in a world where we need creative thinking, creative problem solving, creative approaches to anything that we do, whether it's in engineering, science, or law, marketing, anything, or management, anything like that. We have to have a much broader understanding, and these things need to be taught not just in grade school, elementary school, middle school, and so on, but you need to take them through college, through university. What I mean by college is the university, and I think that is something that I personally think that's something that needs to be changed. I mean, I'm not just talking about just adding a course in, let's say, arts or something like that, or adding a course in, let's say, in some humanity, anthropology or something like that. But it's creating an environment, creating a culture, creating a cultural landscape within a, let's say, higher education institution like a university, where the students can actually interact with people from these different disciplines. It's not just about taking a course. I think because we all know from education research that, I as a professor can go into a classroom and I talk for, let's say, 1 hour, and and I give students problems to work on assignments, and I test them for their knowledge and all of that. But the way that the students really learn is through peer exchange. That's where the deep learning takes place, right? And that's something that's been well established in education research. And so that is why I say, in terms of bringing arts and humanities into a curriculum, you need to do that in a much more engaging way within the university. So having a broad university like Peradeniya was great for me in that regard, because even though I only had, I think, engineering and technology classes at the university, uh, we were in this environment where we could interact, we could engage with groups from a much wider, much more diverse background in terms of social background, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of the subjects that they were interested in. So it was a very, very rich environment, and that is so important. I think to develop a society that is that has creativity at its core. So I would like to see in an education system where the humanities and the arts, literature, those kind of things are actually taught, or giving young people an opportunity to actually learn from those things through the undergraduate programs.
Right. Thank you very much, sir. I think I think that I think you answered most of the questions that have been asked by many. I think some of the questions are kind of asking, probably repeating what you mentioned before. So because of that, I'd like to end the Q&A session for now. And while thanking you for accepting our invitation and for spending several hours today and even before to deliver something very useful to all the professionals in general in Sri Lanka. So now I would like to hand over the meeting to Ms. Ruchira Gunasekara, the General Secretary of the Organization of Professional Associations of Sri Lanka, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, Ms. Ruchira. Ms. Ruchira, I think you are on mute.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Dulaney. Good evening to all of you all, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Organization of Professional Associations of Sri Lanka, I'm saying at the outset, our sincere thanks to the eminent panelists, Professor Sanjay Senadira of Texas Tech University of USA, for his participation despite of his very busy schedule, and making a very valuable presentation on the theme, the radically changing nature of work, myth, reality, or just hype, and for sharing his knowledge and insights with us. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for taking your valuable time off to spending your time with us. We are also thankful to the National Issues and the Career Guidance and the Skills Development Committee of the OPA for organizing this webinar in partnership with the Mechanical Engineering Sectional Committee of the Institution of Engineers, which is one of the member associations of OPA. In this regard, I would like to thank the chairperson of the two committees, vice presidents, Engineer Arjuna Manamperi and Engineer Ravi Rupasinghe, and the members of both committees for their efforts. Our sincere thanks to Engineer Dr. Ms. Dulaney Muddunkottua for her contribution as the moderator this evening. Thank you, ma'am, for all your inputs and contribution once again. I would also like to thank our president, Engineer Shantha Senrath, the office bearers, chairman and chairperson of the standing committees, past presidents, members of the Executive Council and the General Forum for their advice and the support in organizing this webinar. And our heartfelt thanks to our audience for their patience and for their input in having this active participation for this webinar. Thank you very much. I also appreciate the hard work of our OPA Secretary staff, headed by Mr. D.N. Cheniviratna, in supporting, in organizing this webinar. I thank you, all of you all, once again, and good night.
Thank you. It's been an honor and a privilege.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.